So today we're going to talk about how do we audit context of the organization, this clause 4. How do we audit it? There are 4 sub-elements in your context of the organization, starting with 4.1. Take note of this. 4.1 is understanding the organization in its context. What do we mean exactly by that? We're going to discuss it. 4.2 would be understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. 4.3 talks about what's the scope of your QMS. And of course, 4.4 would be the different processes of your quality management system. So this is the context of your organization. And we'll talk about how do we audit this. Why audit? Because when we audit this, we will know exactly whether it's properly laid out, it's properly documented, it is adequate, compliant, and most importantly, effective. Hence the auditing part. Let's start with clause 4.1, shall we? Are you ready? So 4.1. 4.1, context of the organization, talks about your organization being able to determine, monitor, and review your external and internal issues. 4.1, context of organization, talks about your organization's ability to determine, not only to determine, but to monitor and review your external and internal issues. So with emphasis on external and internal issues. So this is where it begins. We need to identify this regardless of your sector, your industry, whether you're coming from the academe, you're coming from an industrial plant, or you're a BPO operations, or you're into financial services. You start with the external and internal issues. What are they? Where are they coming from? You need to determine that first, because all these issues would affect your ability to achieve desired results, whether these issues are positive or whether these issues are negative. There are a lot of tools that you can use in determining your external and internal issues, but just sharing with you a best practice here that we're using across different organizations. I'm sure you've heard of the SWOT analysis, SWOT, or the strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Other organizations would use even customized model just to identify all these external and internal issues. Now, I've mentioned about SWOT. How do we use SWOT in determining external and internal issues? That will define your context, okay? So again, remember, we're talking about your context. What's the context of your organization? Now, using SWOT analysis, as you already know this, the SWOT analysis basically is broken down into 4 parts right here. So you have your strength, you have your weaknesses, you have your opportunities, and then you have your threats. So you need to identify what are strengths. Strengths are, of course, positive elements of your organization, whether it's talking about your longevity in the industry, the capability of your employees, the established procedures, the adequacy of resources. All those may be strengths. On the other hand, on the contrary, you may also have weaknesses. Maybe you're lacking manpower. Maybe your procedures are not clearly defined. Maybe your policies are not clearly established. Those are weaknesses. Of course, opportunities, again, are opportunities that you can pursue. These may be opportunities for improvement, wherein your organization can expand, your people can learn new skills. All this can be considered as opportunities. So I'm writing here elements, by the way, or bullets, but when you do your SWOT analysis, you might as well put numbers here. So S1, S2, S3, so that you can easily track it later on. And so the same is true with threats. So you can identify what is threat number 1, what is threat number 2, and so on and so forth. So this is a simple tool. Like I said, there's so many tools out there that you can use, but you may want to use the SWOT analysis. Speaking of external and internal issues, this basically clarifies your external and internal issues. If you look at your opportunities and threats, these are basically external issues. Right? External, outside of the organization. And you may even want to add to the process the PESTEL guide, right? PESTEL stands for political. What are political external issues? What are economic issues? Social, technological, legal, or environmental issues. It can guide your thinking process in terms of identifying these opportunities and threats. So opportunities and threats, you may be guided by this PESTEL in identifying your external issues, okay? And then you also have, on the other hand, the internal issues. Internal, of course, are within the organization. So we're talking about your internal strength. We're talking about your internal weaknesses. In other words, you may want to look at your financials, you may want to look at your performance, you may want to look at your culture, values, goals. This has something to do with your internal issues. So when you do this, you have complied with clause 4.1, which is determining the external and internal issues of the organization. And why is this important? because all these issues, whether internal or external, may affect or could affect the ability of your organization to achieve its desired result. Take note of that. Let me repeat that. Why is it important to identify all this? Because any one of these issues can cripple your organization. All right? Because any one of these issues may compromise your capability to achieve your whatever your desired results may be. Maybe good enrollment, maybe a quality printing material, or whatever your product is, or whatever your service is. It can be compromised with any one of these issues, and you might as well map it properly and accurately. Okay? As you all know, the SWOT analysis is, of course, a combination of both positive and negative issues. So when we speak of positive issues, by the way, positive issues would be your strength. These are positive issues. While negative issues, of course, are your, obviously, weaknesses and threats. So with this one look, you can already identify your external and internal issues. Now, the question here is, how do we audit this? All right? How do we audit this? Obviously, when auditing your 4.1, you may not necessarily actually ask your auditee to present to you the SWOT, because like I said, first things first, there may be other tools that your organization can use in determining your internal and external issues. Whatever the case may be, the auditee should be able to present this in whatever document. But again, this is a best practice, all right? This is a best practice. So the first audit point here, of course, is the identification. Have they identified their external and internal issues, all right? Have they identified this? If they haven't identified this, then that can be an issue in audit, because the standard says in 4.1 that the organization shall determine the external and internal issues. If they present to you a SWOT, well and good, all right? Your second audit point here would be, up to what extent did they do the SWOT analysis? Because some organizations would do a very high-level SWOT analysis that covers the organization. And if they do that, the tendency there is to miss some crucial elements or issues down the line, maybe in the smallest unit, maybe down there in that division, maybe somewhere there in that particular department, there may be issues there that they were not able to cover. So that's your second audit point. Ensure that the SWOT is comprehensively done, that covers all the elements in the organization, both external and internal. All right. So there may be other issues that were not included here. And what's the implication if the issue is not included here? The implication of that later on in the risk management or in the risk assessment, as you all know, if you're certified to this, is that in clause 6, if they miss an element in the SWOT, they would also most likely miss controlling that as one of the risk. Did you get that? That's why the second audit point is very important, which is how extensive is your SWOT analysis? Did it cover all possible or potential or actual issues in the organization, both external and internal? All right. The third audit point here, the third and last audit point I'd like to share with you is that who are involved in the conduct of the SWOT analysis? Is this created by an ad hoc committee? Is this created by an isolated secretariat or steering group, temporary project team that takes care of this? There may be a plus point to that. There may be also a disadvantage to it, all right? Moving forward, what you can possibly do as a best practice is that ensure participation and consultation with all process owners if practicable, all right? Let me repeat that. In doing your SWOT analysis, you need to engage, you need to elicit participation from all process owners if practicable. Representation may be okay for as long as it still captures all the elements here. It's important that you map all these issues, whether external or internal, because like I said, this will affect your risk management down the line later on. So I just shared with you those 3 basic audit points that you may want to consider in auditing your SWOT analysis. First of which is, of course, have they identified it? What tool did they use? Did they use SWOT or any customized internal model in terms of identifying external and internal issues? The second audit point is that have they, of course, extensively covered these issues? And finally, who were involved in terms of participating in creating this SWOT analysis?